This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo, giving you the inside track on all the big talking points from Anfield.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Blood Red podcast, live and in person at the lovely Lovelocks Cafe. Sean Bradbury hosting today, making my debut in this environment, which I'm very pleased to do. Got two very special guests with me, unfortunately not Fabinho's two French Bulldogs who couldn't meet their demands, but we've got two of the Echo's finest, which is Theo Squires and Keifer MacDonald. Theo, first of all, back from Hungary. I believe you were there for the F1, but you were really there to ask about Szoboszlai, surely.
Yeah, we saw a few Szoboszlai shirts going around. Did a little stadium tour on this one he's got no connection with, Ferencváros, which sounds like the perfect pronunciation here. But I believe in Hungary I've got it absolutely wrong. And
you sounded convincing to me, at least, yeah.
But they're all excited about him. He's like this big talent for them. He's like this great player. And even though they've got no connections to him, like individually, Hungarians support the national team first, so they're all buzzing that he's got this move, looking forward to seeing what he can do at Liverpool. But all the excitement about that was sort of, I suppose, undone by, they're all annoyed by their own club as well because they got knocked out of the Champions League by some Faroe Island part-timers. Seems a long time ago Liverpool were having to do these qualifiers in those Champions League. Remember when we were playing like Lithuanian farmers or TNS from the Welsh side back in 2005, wasn't it? But yeah, it was a nice little trip. I got a nice little tan, and now I'm just enjoying being back in rainy England, rainy Liverpool. Quite a come away from what was in Budapest. It was hot for the majority, 35 degrees.
Excellent, well, good to see you back, rested and refreshed. And Keifer, I want to give you a little shout out, Keifer, because I'll take you into the world of the Echo's WhatsApp group. Keifer put a question in there this week on our sport group. I think it's genuinely one of the best questions ever. So we'll start the pod with this. Have you drunk more pints sitting down or standing up? Keifer introduced us to this question. So your answer first, Keifer, if you will.
My answer, I mean, depends how literally we are taking the question. Is it pints? Is it bottles? Who knows? But I think I'm a man who's going to say standing up. I'm a bar leaner, I'd like to call myself. So
a bar leaner, I like
I'm not
it.
sure if Theo was sitting down or standing up in Budapest over the weekend having his pints, but certainly sounded like a better weekend than mine. But yeah, delighted to be in. Plenty to talk about.
Indeed, Theo, standing up or sitting down?
I think it's sitting down when you add everything together. When you go to a pub, you don't go, I'm going to stand up. You look for a seat. If you go to the sport, yeah, granted, at the football, we're in this country where you're not allowed to be seated with your beers, but you can at the F1, you can in Munich or wherever. If you go into the Bundesliga games, most of Europe let you sit down in your seat and drink your beers. So when you add all that together, you and me, Sean, we're of a certain age now, you're always looking to sit down rather than stand up. 100%. Keifer's obviously 8-10 years younger than us, so he's not hit that yet. His knees are still doing him fine, his back's still doing him fine.
To be fair, by my back pains, my chronic back pains, may I add, I'm probably going to say that is further evidence that I'm a standing up pint drinker. I think the concourse half-time pints are doing a lot of lifting in that conversation.
Yeah, well, absolutely. We'll keep those pints coming. All medicinal, all good stuff for your back. Away from pints, we'll start at the end, which is the end of Jordan Henderson after 12 years at Liverpool, and it's inevitably the first place we come to. Theo, go to you first on this, and just want to really get a sense of what you think of how history will judge him. I mean, it's a strange one, this, isn't it? So at the time of recording, we haven't had confirmation from Liverpool or Ettifaq that Henderson is actually going, but we have seen him kicking a ball or trying to kick a ball in a Rondo that didn't look the best standard, I'm not going to lie, with his new teammates in Croatia. I saw one person on Twitter sum it up last night and say, he's a legend, but he's messed up the final act of his own play. And I think that's quite an accurate way of looking at it personally. But how do you see this, Theo? I mean, I feel like now on this pod, we should be talking about Henderson's best moments, but it doesn't feel like that is the right place to start, really. It feels like a bizarre and sour ending to his time at Anfield.
Yeah, agree with that completely. Like, the way this transfer has been handled is a shambles. And the only issue is we don't know who's to blame for that. We don't know what is going on behind the scenes for there to be delays left and right, who's pushing for what. Like, there's been whispers that Henderson initially rejected it and then Gerrard came in and changed his mind. But at the end of the day, the transfer has not happened yet he has done his big farewell video on Instagram. There's been footage of him training out there with them. Something's not quite matched up, and I know there's going to be backlash to it in terms of whether he's a hypocrite or just let him go and get his money. Like, if anyone was offered that much money to go and have their fun in the sun, you don't begrudge him that. But Henderson, he is held to higher standards. Like it or not, he has put himself forward as this political speaker for so many issues, and he's got to be held to that higher standard. He's a Liverpool captain as well. Like, I know it's been pointed out on social media, if he hadn't signed that new contract 2 years ago, he goes on a free transfer this summer with Firmino, with Keifer, Oxlade-Chamberlain, Milner, and he's an absolute club legend. He gets his big farewell at Anfield, then he goes and plays in that Southampton game, potentially gets a testimonial. We're talking about that because he's been at the club so long, and there's all that love. And while there'd still be those questions of, is Saudi Arabia really the right move for you with all the politics behind it, you wouldn't begrudge it the same way you are now. This transfer has completely disrupted Liverpool's summer, their pre-season planning. We can take positives out of it. You're getting more money than you'd have thought for a player who's coming towards the end of his career. You can reinvest that in the squad. But this is not a transfer that they've been planning for months. It's not as though they knew in April, May, Henderson's going to go. If you'd said to him, you could have gone to Saudi Arabia back then and you had no money in there, he's not interested in that transfer. He's looking at playing for England in the Euros next summer. Like, Milner's just gone to Brighton. If there was Premier League interest and he wanted to go, he could have gone there. His head's been turned by the money. Like I said, it's a great wage for him, but it just doesn't feel the right way for a Liverpool captain to leave. Like when Gerrard left, it was the end of his contract, 35, he wanted to go and play more football, which Henderson's doing, but it still feels like there's more life left in him. He's got another 2 years. He should be maybe embracing the Milner role, so to speak, because you're still going to play a hell of a lot of football and go through so many Liverpool captains over the years, whether it's like the ones the club have decided to get rid of, your Paul Inces, your Jamie Redknapps, your Robbie Fowlers. Before that, or like you're just too old, like John Barnes, Ian Rush. It's always been Liverpool have made that decision. It's not been the players gone prematurely. They've all got so much service out of them. Liverpool got so much service out of Henderson. But for him to go like this, almost out the back door, so it's like not really something you want to embrace and look at. I wasn't interested in watching his farewell video. I don't care what he's saying about how great Liverpool was. We know how great Liverpool was. We know you've won absolutely everything. So why go on the eve of the new season when you're supposed to be leading them through towards that next chapter? Klopp signed his new contract to give this transition to the next manager. So you've got this next great Liverpool side. Henderson should be part of that as the backroom side. You can take positives out of it, but it's still very murky waters this transfer has been completed in. And when you're seeing him saying bye before it's even done, training with his new teammates before it's even done, yeah, there's going to be a lot that's going to come out, I think, behind the scenes in the future, whether that's him in paperback sales for a next book or when he comes and does Legends matches. You want the truth here. We don't want, it was great winning the Champions League, it was great winning the Premier League. We've heard all this. We want Jordan Henderson to come out and say, right, you're going to be disappointed because I've made this decision, this is why, and then have a message for the LGBT community and everyone else that feels let down by him. Still a Liverpool legend, but at the moment this is the lasting image, going out not on a high but on this muddied low.
Keifer, I think Theo summed it up superbly there, but going back to the weepy video that Henderson's released, we were predicting which music was going to be in the background, and sadly no Adele and Coldplay as we thought there would be. He threw the Kanye interlude in there, but of all the lights, which is a slight surprise. But yeah, as I think Theo's spoken well and summed up why this just is unexpected, is odd. It's taken so many twists and turns that just feel unbecoming of how a captain should leave. I mean, what's your general assessment of this and how it's played out over the last few weeks?
I think it's such a huge shame. I think whenever you envision Jordan Henderson's time at Liverpool coming to an end, 12 years, 13 years, 14 years, whenever he was going to depart, I always thought he'd be on the same level of a Jamie Carragher or a Steven Gerrard. You're talking about full Anfields, his kids by his side, his family there on the side of the pitch, with a sold-out Anfield, a mosaic there with his, Jordan Henderson 14, whatever. And, he really gets to kind of savour that moment and appreciate it. And let's be real, this is a guy who's faced, certainly in my lifetime, I can't think of a player who's divided opinion like Jordan Henderson has. And even, in recent years after winning the Champions League and the Premier League, he's still faced criticism and maybe people still haven't been convinced by him. I mean, I saw a bizarre tweet the other day that said that he was at a technical obstacle in Klopp's plans, which is bizarre considering, he's captained Liverpool to 3 Champions League finals, nearly a quadruple, guided them to a first league title in 30 years, the 6th Champions League. I mean, the list goes on. And, I mean, with the Fabinho deal, I think everyone could maybe see it coming. There was, he's a sellable asset. With Henderson, everything that he said towards the end of last season about the fight and kind of going again, and, that getting that hunger back, it just doesn't add up. And that's before you even include any of the political stuff that he's been involved in and the campaigning, because there's going to be people listening to this now who aren't interested in that side of football, and they're purely, their intake is the 90 minutes on a Saturday, and that's completely fair enough. But to a lot of people like us, we're interested in the wider impact it has on society. And for a time, Jordan Henderson was someone Liverpool fans and I'd like to think football fans around around the country, certainly during the pandemic, was someone they could be proud of. He set up the players' NHS campaign, didn't he? Kind of went back and forth with Matt Hancock during that, really devastating, couple of months we had in 2020. And he was a real leader, and all the kind of talk about him that was, he was a player you could be proud of, and you could be, in the same way that Manchester United fans will look at Marcus Rashford as someone who embodies what it is to be Liverpool and, gets the culture and gets the values of the city. But it almost feels like he's just thrown that in the bin, and it's such a huge shame because, as I say, he's fought this battle for 12 years. He's fought against the tide of winning Liverpool supporters over, and it now feels like he's gone and scored, a catastrophic own goal, and it's like, all for what? Because, I say I understand. I mean, this is a man who's going to be earning at Liverpool $5 million a year, and I've heard a lot of people say it's life-changing money, but it's not as if he's been working in Aldi on £9 an hour, for the past 10 years. This is, as I say, a bloke who's an international footballer, 70-odd caps for England, 3 Champions League finals. He is a multi-millionaire already. He will have passive income until the day he dies. So this idea that, this lad who comes from a working-class background in Sunderland is now going to get some final paycheck, I just don't really buy it. And the thing as well is, yes, Liverpool are kind of undergoing this huge rebuild this summer, and they're not in the Champions League. They might not compete with City this year, but I mean, James Milner at 33 played 45 games for Liverpool. They went on to win the Champions League. The year later he wins a league title, and okay, I'm sure if you dissected those 45, 50 appearances, whatever he kind of accumulated, a lot of them would probably be from the 60th minute onwards, and seeing out the game and almost being that manager on the pitch. But go and do that at least do that for a year and get that send-off that you deserve. Even if it's this time next year, and he goes to, even if he went to like an Aston Villa or a Brighton or somewhere like that, at least go out on a high and get that kind of connection with the fans, because you'll never ever get that back. And we've seen before with exits with huge Liverpool figures. I think of Graham Souness, and you listen to how he talks about his time at Liverpool now and his exit.
You don't remember Souness'
No,
exit.
but I'm saying, but when you listen to what he says, he did a really good segment on Sky Sports a few years ago, and he basically said it still kind of eats at him, the way he left. And you think, Henderson in 5-10 years' time, when his kids are all grown up, he will have an endless commas in his bank account, but he won't have that one kind of truly unforgettable memory of saying goodbye to a forward at Anfield, because whatever the club's plans are now, as at the time of recording, we haven't had any official announcement from either club, so we don't know if they're preparing an all singing all dancing farewell speech with his kind of his own letter or a big montage or what. We don't know what the tone is going to be, because this is ultimately a player who's walked out 2 weeks before the start of the season. He's left the pre-season camp, and after Liverpool have done all the heavy lifting in the kind of early weeks of the summer, they now face another huge rebuild, which is unthinkable. I mean, they played Chelsea in 15 days, I think it is, which is absolutely mental. So how the club kind of portray that and portray his exit will be really interesting, and certainly we'll be hearing from Klopp this weekend in Singapore, and how he kind of battles that and kind of his take on it. I'm sure he'll be very amicable and say he's been a great servant and such an important figure, but I'm sure there'll be a point of there'll be something inside of him that thinks my captain just walked out on me. Liverpool don't have a vice captain at the minute. Liverpool don't have a captain at the minute, and after doing as I say, a lot of heavy lifting in these kind of early weeks of the summer, you're now looking at him thinking the serious work now needs to begin again, which is really disappointing, because as I think I've said it on a few podcasts in recent days and weeks, is that if you kind of isolate the stuff on the pitch, it's actually been really promising. All the forwards have been scoring. Trent's maybe looking at this new position, and you've got some of the young lads doing well, but all of a sudden now you've got a massive kind of two cogs of your midfield who aren't there. So it is really disappointing. And as I say, the one big thing is that Henderson will never ever have that Anfield send off. And I just think, when Firmino, you look at the fanfare he got in the final 3 months of his Liverpool career after it was announced, I just don't understand how there wasn't a part of Henderson who thought, I want this, I want to be lauded. And I know he's a guy who likes to stay away from the limelight and maybe usher his teammates to the centre stage, but surely just after everything you've given to Liverpool, I mean, 494 appearances I think it is, I mean the 4th highest captain appearances in Liverpool's history. 12 years, nearly half of his life has been spent at Liverpool, and he's just gone out like that, and it leaves such a sour taste, such a poor taste. It's been handled so horrifically by all parties. I'm just really disappointed, to be honest.
I will defend him a little bit in the sense of footballing farewells shouldn't be normal. Like, Liverpool have got into this situation where so many players have left on free transfers in recent years, so they have had those farewells, like Origi and the four we've just seen this summer. But traditionally, players don't go like that. They go into the summer, bids come in, and that's when it happens. Like, we've not had farewells for Sadio Mane, we've not had farewells, if you want to go back, Luis Suarez, Felipe Coutinho, Fernando Torres. They've had to come back for like charity games, and Coutinho hasn't come back, he's come back as an opposing player. Like, traditionally, you don't get that. It's just football moves very quickly. And so it's just because we've had these recent memories, think, well, why hasn't Henderson been able to have
I suppose
part of that?
The flip side of that is, if he, he's 33 years of age, he's moving to this league, he's moving to a team that I guarantee he hadn't heard of 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago. I think that is also just that leaves a really bitter taste. If he was to, as I said, move to an Aston Villa, even if he went to the MLS, or even if he went to Serie A, or the league.
Say he sits out his contract. What, 2 years left? Is it? Sunderland could be Premier League by then. He could go back to his boyhood club.
In
get the heroes'
you can probably
reception.
go and buy Sunderland now. That's the kind of money he's going to be on, which is absolutely mad. But I completely understand Theo's point, and I kind of wrote a similar piece yesterday, saying that these, as great as these exits were, they're ultimately a failure for Liverpool and FSG because they haven't had any return on, all these big investments. Yes, the money is great for Henderson, but it's almost like, he's kind of had his head screwed on for pre-season. He's had this kind of money waft under his nose, and he's thought, I'm out of it, and that is just the bottom line of it. Whether he had an Anfield send-off or not, whether he left to go to Celtic, to any other club in the world or any other league in the world, just after everything he stood for, he's put his head above the parapet, and chose to be an ally for the LGBT plus community. And I just think now you can't pick and choose your moments of when you want to be an ally. If you're an ally for life. Your morals don't change. But for Jordan Henderson, clearly the thing at the moment is there is a valuation of somewhere between 200,000 and 350,000 where his morals change significantly. And I think that above all is the kind of sticking point here, which is a really, really sour look for him.
Absolutely. No, very well said, the pair of you, and it will be interesting to see, as you say, the tone which Liverpool choose to strike in all this. It's not easy for them with how this has played out, but they played their partner as well, haven't they? So yeah, we'll see how that unfolds. Well, let's zoom out a little bit. You both mentioned this idea of disruption, of unexpected developments after the first stage of a midfield rebuild that's had to turn into a more advanced and kind of deeper one. They're having to really kind of gut the whole squad here. So at time of recording now, Henderson, as we've said, it seems like that's imminent. The player himself has confirmed he's leaving. We're just waiting for one of the two clubs to confirm before the other does. Fabinho, the squad travel out to Singapore today, and we now believe that he's not going to be on the plane. That deal, again, to take him to Saudi Arabia is being close to wrapping up. And the third wheel in all this is Romeo Lavia. It sounds like we've written ourselves the echo that a first bid went in, was rejected. Second bid is on the way. I do like the dynamic around how the bid has been reported, because it's almost, we were saying in the office yesterday, it's almost like the bid has got a tracking code on it. Bid being prepared, bid at the depot, Jorg is on his way in the van with the bid now. So let's have a little look at Lavia first of all, then Theo. Do you think that he is... you'd like to think he wouldn't be the only arrival now, especially in the light of Fabinho and Henderson going, but do you think there's often this traditional spell, isn't there, where a footballer comes in, Fabinho being a good example, especially in a specialist midfield position like that, where you're the holding man. Do you think he's someone who could make a bit of an impact and could be a first-team player, sooner than some might expect?
I think so, yeah. It's still one where you'd prefer him to have a transitional period into Liverpool. Players don't always come in and hit the ground running. Yes, we've got examples like Luis Diaz, Cody Gakpo, but others take longer. And Fabinho, Andy Robertson, they were two prime examples of that. Lavia, he has had this year of Premier League football in a struggling team. He's a talent, but he's still raw. He's still you see all the compilations going on social media at the moment going, oh my God, what could we be signing here? But he still made some pretty foolish mistakes. Wasn't he at fault for Jota's goal on the last day of the season?
He had his first assist for Liverpool, yeah.
So he's still got a lot to learn. You'd like to see a more senior midfielder come in alongside him. Or that's why you're a bit hesitant about Henderson and Fabinho going, because you want someone to pass on that baton. It's all very well having the transition, but if these senior players are going, they've essentially dropped it, and you're asking the next generation to pick it up off the floor, and it's a big ask for them. Yes, you're not going to be in the Champions League, you're in Europa League, you can maybe find your feet a bit more, but you're not just going into a Liverpool midfield with these senior players that have won everything. You're going into a new look midfield with Alexis McAllister, who's just had the biggest move of his career, Dominic Szoboszlai, who's never played in the Premier League before, and I know it's a bit harsh to say, focus on the injury he's had here, but he's rolled his ankle. Well, that's just in training. It's going to take some time to get used to the physicality. Lesser players than him have struggled, and better players than him have struggled with the physicality of English football. It takes time to adjust, so you want that senior player who can just go in and make sure that it's a smoother process for Liverpool. But at the same time, if you bring in a senior midfielder now who's at the peak of the powers, so the same age as a McAllister to be holding midfielder, then what's the point of signing Lavia? Because then they're taking that position for the next 5 years. And don't forget, you've still got Stefan Bajcetic as part of this conversation, who can be a number 6 for the next decade as well. Obviously, he's a player they like the look of. He offers a lot of tributes that Klopp likes in his midfield. He's good on the ball. He's really good at intercepting the ball and pressing. This is stuff that suits the Liverpool midfield. He's got a bit more pace than Fabinho, so he can carry it out of midfield as well. He's not as tall, he's not as physical, but he's still a 19-year-old boy. Yes, we're focusing on the age. Yes, he's just been relegated with Southampton, but the old saying is, if you're good enough, you're old enough. Like, it was only a few months ago, for like essentially 18 months, we were all waiting for Jude Bellingham, who was 18, 19, to come and be part of this Liverpool midfield. And he was a player that everyone was looking forward to seeing in the Champions League games. He's this exciting box-to-box midfielder that Liverpool fans have wanted their midfield to have for so long. And it's just now, everything's turned slightly. That is not what they need now. They need this number 6, this domineering powerhouse that is going to win absolutely everything, that's going to cover every blade of grass, is not going to make silly mistakes and can stand up and be counted. It's a gamble with a young player. It's going to take time, but he could come in and surprise everyone and be an instant success. Like, Chelsea want him. I think Chelsea tried to sign him within weeks of him joining Southampton in the first place.
Yeah, 50
Man
million
City
bid by all accounts.
Value him highly. The fact they've got the buyback for next year, so it makes sense for Liverpool to get in there first. But you're putting a lot of pressure on his shoulders to be this instant success in that midfield at the expense of there not being a number 6 there. Because we've seen with Bajcetic, he's a great player. He's ready up in his mind, but he's still in a boy's body. And Lavia had a few injuries last year as well, which maybe suggests the same sort of thing. Like, Trent could be a number 6, but then do you need another right back? That's a big ask to say on Conor Bradley. Come in now and be a Premier League right back in an inverted role when you're a bit more defensive than you were on loan at Bolton, where you're a natural wing back. Or you put in Joe Gomez there, and then you're saying, right, well, that means we need a left back to do it. And we've not seen Andy Robertson as a inverted fullback, so maybe they don't have the confidence in him doing it. There's still a lot to unfold here. Like, we thought Liverpool would do this inverted formation. Everything was set in stone. They're going to sign the signings to fit into this. 2 attacker midfielders, a number 6 to be that long-term replacement, and the left-sided centre-back. None of us considered an actual out-and-out CDM at that time at this stage. That was the more long-term thinking. And now it's, what do we do now? We need to get it done quickly. So yeah, it's so much pressure. They've got to get everything absolutely right, otherwise you fear another season of transition.
Well, this is it, Keith. I think Theo's tapped very neatly into my fear around this as well, is that Henderson and Fabinho go. That's, and as Theo says, of course there would have been a long-term plan in place to replace them, find successors for them. But they are very much current players. You look at last season, I think they played respectively 35 and 36 games in the league. Okay, in Henderson's case, the number of starts was slowly being pared down as his role kind of diminished in the squad. But both of them had comfortably in excess of 2,000 Premier League minutes last season, and that's a hell of a lot to replace when, as Theo again says, a lot of the options in the squad are either youngsters or inexperienced players or new recruits. So, in your view, as it stands now, does it have to be Lavia plus someone?
I think so. I think the kind of luxury that you would like Lavia to have is that if he comes in and hits the ground running, the shirt is there for him. He's not waiting in the wings like I take the kind of example of Kelleher and Alisson. Kelleher does so well 2 seasons ago, but he doesn't get a kick because Alisson is the best goalkeeper in the world. So that's kind of a really kind of sticking point in his development. But I think with the Lavia thing, you maybe think, well, if someone comes in, or even if Fabinho did end up staying or whatever, you think, well, long term, if Lavia impresses, he's going to be a first name on the team sheet. But also, you would like the kind of confidence and the luxury of, okay, maybe if he finds it tough, you got to think he's. I know he was at City for a few years, but he's moving from Southampton, which I think a lot of time as young players, I think we will forget that it is a big move. Nearly the other end of the country, so he's going to be settling off the pitch, and if he doesn't hit the ground running straight away, you don't want that burden on him. I mean, you look at Bajcetic at the kind of start of the turn of the year when Fabinho was dumped out of the team, and at 18, I'm sure Bajcetic couldn't believe his luck. I'm sure he was one of them where he probably didn't feel tired, he probably didn't feel fatigued because he was just living off adrenaline. But if you maybe think if he hadn't have been injured, he probably would have played probably the remainder of the games that season, the kind of the final 11 that he missed. So you don't want to put that, as Theo says, that stress on his body, because obviously Bajcetic's body ultimately broke down, didn't it, with the kind of injury he suffered in March and ended his season. But if assuming Fabinho does go, as he's not going to be in this tour squad and that gets finalised, I would like to see a Lavia, but then someone of, I said it a few times, of someone of Thiago's kind of ilk and kind of age category of when he came to Liverpool. Someone who's done it, he's got his medals on the table, he's got the experience, he's got the know-how, but he probably isn't. He's probably looking at his last big contract. He's probably thinking, right, I'll maybe do 3 or 4 years here. Hopefully be part of something great, get a few trophies, get a few medals, kind of add to the collection. But ultimately, in 5-6 years' time, I'm not going to be here. So that's the kind of...
Name names, Keifer. Give us a name.
Joshua Kimmich, I think.
That was the obvious one. I knew that was what was coming.
Yeah. Didn't want to fuel any false speculation, but he's been... I think reports in Germany have potentially said that Thomas Tuchel in his first pre-season is maybe looking at having a bit of a clear out by Munich. Benjamin Pavard's another name. Joshua Kimmich, Goretzka as well. So these are, all in slightly different roles, but they're all players who you'd be looking at as maybe a team in the Premier League looking to rebuild. We're talking about players on the pitch in Fabinho and Henderson who've been vital in recent years, but we're also talking about leaders. And you've just lost Roberto Firmino, who I know doesn't speak a lot of English, but in terms of having a presence of someone,
or at least pretends he doesn't,
having someone who leads by examples, as in this kind of leadership group, and he would have obviously been someone that the young players who, when they come up from the academy would have looked at. James Milner as well. I don't need to tell you how important his role at Liverpool has been over the last 8 years. Jordan Henderson, obviously the captain, and then obviously Fabinho goes too. So there is. I know people have pointed to that there's loads of international captains: Salah, Van Dijk, Szoboszlai, Robertson, and probably a few more. But I think in terms of people who've been there and done that, and certainly at Liverpool are lacking that now. So they need to make up that experience from elsewhere. And if they can get a Kimmich or someone of that ilk and that calibre and that class, I think that'll be a kind of a really astute signing for Liverpool. And then you're looking at Lavia, who's 19, obviously played 29 Premier League games. Long term, he's maybe thinking, right, well, I can learn off him and maybe kind of ease myself into that role. And at the end of the day, a successful season for Liverpool next year is going to be, I think off the top of my head, 65 games if they don't get a Europa League bye. So 65 games is a lot of minutes to be shared around. Whether Jordan Henderson thinks so or not, there is going to be plenty of minutes. So, whoever comes in and whoever's got the shirt, the lads who aren't maybe the first names on the team sheet will, you'd imagine, rack up 30, 40 appearances just by default. So,
is there a name, Theo, out there for you? I mean, I think the other thing that colours this debate is it a midfielder or is it a defender, or is there a player who you think could even combine the two? Because that's my one worry, again, on top of everything we've discussed, is this idea of the disruption in midfield with what Fabinho and Henderson have sought to do, and with them both being off, it's kind of almost shunted to the background, this idea early in the window. The Klopp refused to rule out that Liverpool would sign a centre-back, and okay, Levi Colwill seemed to be the number one target, someone we'd said as far back as March the Reds were looking at and were interested in. Doesn't seem like he's going to be doable, but where do you stand on it? If there was one player to come in, would it be a defender, would it be a midfielder, and would there be a name?
I think it needs to be a utility player. It needs to be someone like a Gini Wijnaldum who plays those multiple positions and ticks multiple boxes. It's the one criticism you can really give Fabinho over his Liverpool career. Yes, he had that little stint at centre-back, but he wasn't really particularly liking it. He said he was just glad to be back in midfield, and it's an experiment we've not seen again since. You want a player who can be a centre-back or can go full-back, can be that number 6, can be that number 8. And if you sign a utility player like that, it means when Lavia or Bajcetic are that little bit older, they can make that number 6 role their own. You're not got what do we do with them? They can still be that number 8, or they can be a right back or a left centre back, or I don't know. I've written a piece the other week on Cooper Myers at Atalanta. He's someone Liverpool been linked with for a number of years now. I think he's in his mid-20s. He's a holding midfielder, granted a very different sort of holding midfielder to a Fabinho, but he can get the ball forward, he can win it back, he's good at set pieces, he can play as a number 8, he can play as a left-sided centre-back. Look at another player they've been linked at Atletico Madrid, Marcus Llorente. He's this all-round midfielder that can be a 6, an 8, a 10, he can play out wide, but he can also play as a right-back, and you think maybe that is the way to go, because if you sign one of them, well, then you've got your cover at centre-back, or you've got your alternative to Trent at right-back. They can be the number 6, but then if Lavia or Bajcetic hit the ground running, you're not really stuck with a number 6 you don't know what to do with. You can just put them in a different position as a number 8. And that's what made Gini Wijnaldum so important for Liverpool. Time and time again, midfielders would be signed and we think, oh, that's him done. He's not going to get in the starting 11. But he was just always available, and he was so versatile that you could have him in so many roles. We never saw him as a number 6 when they signed him. We saw him as a number 10 or a wide midfielder. He reinvented himself as this number 8. And that was so vital for Liverpool. Like Henderson, when he was made as a number 6 and then he reinvented himself as a number 8 again, that's what they need, I think, rather than this someone who's like a perfect number 6. Because while it'd be great to get a Kimmich, he's still an older player who's not played in the Premier League before, and he's not got the injury issues of a Thiago, but they put a lot of money and a lot of effort in Thiago to only really get returns for him for half a season each time. I'm not saying it's a mistake. He's been a great player for the club. He's a great one to have around the camp. But I think he's another player who only plays one position. It's the fact that Thiago, you need him alongside that number 6, and it doesn't really fit with the inverted fullback. So you need someone who ticks more of these boxes here, who can suit a number of Liverpool formations, play in a number of positions, and isn't just a short-term fix until Lavia gets a bit older, until Bajcetic gets a bit older. Someone who can really be part of this midfield going forward into the future and be that peak year experience that they're now losing with Henderson going, with Fabinho probably going, and just make it a more round, collected, strong unit. Because at the moment there are big gaps in it. There are gaps in it last year when it didn't have players at the peak years, but at least they had experience and youth. Now it's just essentially youth and Thiago. And while you think Curtis Jones can step forward more, he's had a great few months. You think he can be a leader now and really stake his claim. It just needs that little bit more.
I think as well that the difficulty I think Liverpool face now is that everyone, it's going to be the worst kept secret in football that Liverpool need a midfielder or two. And I know they've, the kind of the transfer fees of the two lads that will probably be in the region of somewhere 50 million combined is going to obviously boost, their coffers and what they're able to spend. But, that is going to make negotiations an awful lot tougher, as demonstrated by Southampton holding out for this £50 million mark for Lavia. And that would be a championship record. I know probably won't be a championship player, but what I'm saying from a championship selling point of view, I think that does make it difficult. We've seen obviously with Brighton and kind of Moises Caicedo that I know they're a team on the up and probably in a better position than Chelsea at the minute, but teams aren't. The selling team now has all the powers. Players sign big contracts, and obviously Lavia is only a year into his. So if, at the end of the day, if Liverpool don't meet their offer or the valuation, which fingers crossed they do, Liverpool have to look elsewhere, and then that's when you kind of you get 10%, 20% added onto the price and a premium, and that's when it becomes difficult. And as I say, we're 2.5 weeks out from this Chelsea game. I just think Liverpool need to get a body in beforehand, because it very much feels like, if you look kind of historically at Klopp's signings, off the top of my head, I think the only probably late one they've done, apart from loans and Arthur Melo and all those kind of January ones a few years ago, is probably Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain is that late midfield one. I think there was probably a bit of haggling over the price as well. I think Chelsea were interested at the time. And you look at when his Liverpool career really kick-started, it was in the January when Coutinho left. So, it kind of shows that if you don't have a few weeks of pre-season, certainly under a manager like Klopp, where you're going to get used to your philosophies and all the different kind of styles and systems, then you really are going to be playing catch-up. And with Liverpool playing, Sunday, Thursday, it is going to be a brutal schedule. So, yes, there is games to blood them in, but Liverpool can't afford a season of transition again. They can't afford to be staring down 20 points behind Man City by the time it's January or February. So it is really vital that if they are able to kind of strike a second bid for Lavia and get that accepted, great. But if not, I would encourage them to move on and kind of just get someone out, seeing who fits the profile. Okay, he might not be as great as a player, might be a short-term solution, but I don't think Liverpool are. I think whilst earlier in the window with McAllister and Szoboszlai, they could maybe hold their nerve a bit, and I know they had the release clauses, but I think that paid off into Liverpool's hands. But now it very much feels like Liverpool don't have time to faff around and mess around. They just need to get bodies in. You're
coming out with the big shouts today. I thought I was the one with the reputation for two-pitting people. You finished Jordan Henderson more than any of us have done. Saying move on from Lavia and throwing out Josh Kimmich.
I think stay with. I think Lavia ticks all the boxes. I think if you had a checklist, he ticks them all. And you don't play for Man City and you don't get kind of headhunted by Pep if you're not a good player, whether or not he was ready. You just got to. Just because you don't get into the Man City first team doesn't make you a bad player. Look at he essentially got forced out of a treble-winning side. Trying to break through as a young player, that must have been impossible. I think the fact that Man City inserted a buyback clause says an awful lot about what they thought of him and as a player and his kind of potential. Maybe if he had a few years away from City. As it sounds like Liverpool are preparing a second bid, as Doyle wrote yesterday. So fingers crossed that's accepted. But if Southampton start playing now, hard to get kind of over this second bid, or their asking price increases. I just don't think Liverpool have time to waste. 50 million quid. It's not 50 million quid what it was 10 years ago. The fact that Liverpool have nearly recouped their money for Jordan Henderson feels crazy, and that just kind of shows you the disparity in the market between 2011 and 2023. But as I say, they just need bodies in, and whether that is target A, B or C, they just need to go and get someone.
You say it's a deal both clubs will want done quickly, because as much as we're looking towards the start of the season, Liverpool flying out to Singapore and wanting Lavia, if they get him, to get up to speed as quickly as possible. The Championship season starts a week earlier. By all accounts, Lavia had pretty much a stinker in the last pre-season friendly. His head's turned. He's distracted there, which we expect for any young player. Like we saw it with Fabio Carvalho for the second half of his last season with Fulham, maybe not to that extent, but it is a distraction. And if you're going to challenge for promotion to the Premier League, however much they get up front from Liverpool could be huge to those efforts. I don't know exactly how much Southampton have done in the transfer market so
They've
far.
got a new manager as well, so
there's a lot for them to do. They'll want it done quickly because they're even more against the clock to have everything in place for the start of the season. And Championship's a long slog, and you don't want these distractions. Whether you go in for promotion to the Premier League or you're going for Champions League football, whatever Liverpool's aims are this season. It's well documented on this podcast, my football club past, and you do all the pre-season interviews with there with the new signings. And they are all adamant that you need to be in for the start of pre-season to give yourself the best chance of being a success. Because if you're playing catch-up, it is a struggle to get in that side to impress, get up to the physical demands, make the relationships with your players. And you think Liverpool, it's even more demanding because Klopp asks for that little bit more intensity, physicality, all those commitments there. Like if you're a 19-year-old in a struggling Southampton team, those demands are so different to what Klopp wants from a fully working Liverpool midfield. It's a lot to get up to speed, and it can take months, it can take time into the new season. So you just want it done as quickly as possible to give you at least those 2 weeks before the season starts in Singapore to just give you that first step. Otherwise, playing catch-up once the season gets underway. That's been what's cost Liverpool in these recent years when they haven't had the full pre-season, where they have had like injuries or when they've coming back from, we're going early because of the mid-season World Cup, or just finished the season in June because Champions League, or you've got the pandemic. This was Liverpool's chance to get everything back in control. A full summer, a full pre-season, let's be refreshed, recharge, let's go again. And they've just had the rug pulled out from their feet a little bit. They need to get back control back if they're going to give themselves a good chance this season.
And I think as well, just to kind of add to what Theo says, it felt like a big summer, not only because of everything he's just mentioned, but the fact they were all trying out this new formation. There's potentially a new midfield three going to be on the horizon at Stamford Bridge. It's McAllister, Szoboszlai, Gakpo, whoever is going to be filling those positions. It's like, well, if they're all kind of starting at the same point, it's like it's easier to kind of harness those relationships early doors. But if you've got two lads who have maybe done 3 or 4 weeks of pre-season, you've got one lad who's maybe done 10 days or 2 weeks, and it's not only that, but it's the fact of there's such an importance now. If we assume Trent's going to take this inverted role long term, there's such a huge importance on who is at the base of that midfield. I think in that new system, obviously, as well as Trent being the kind of focal point of that, there's huge emphasis on Ibrahim Konate in his role, and there's a huge emphasis on whoever takes that Fabinho succession role, and obviously that is hopefully going to be Romeo Lavia. So fingers crossed Liverpool can get something done before the end of the week or
before the end of this podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be absolutely gutted if he's not doing the Axeline by the time I'm back in the office, but it's as I say, just get people in and quickly, because it is a massive summer for Liverpool now again.
No, you're right, time is of the essence. And Jorg, if you're listening, you're not out doing a delivery, Theo's got you boxed off with a couple of exciting names. So final point I want to come to, and obviously we've touched on this in terms of leadership with Henderson and Milner and others leaving, but it's the armband, the captaincy, because this is a massive question now. I mean, I know that Klopp has this leadership group in the dressing room, and you see that in effect out on the pitch. There's players in different positions who are kind of senior figures. So I don't think there's probably too much stock put in who is actually the captain in Klopp's eyes. But clearly, as you lads have said, Henderson's had it for a long time. He's been one of the longest serving captains at Liverpool, and it's at the very least symbolic. It's a significant thing. Basically, I think there's probably 2 main candidates for it now to replace Henderson, and it's Van Dijk and Alexander-Arnold. And I suppose it's whether you go with a player who is, peak, if not just past it, and someone who can have it for a couple of seasons and lead Liverpool well, or you go, well, Trent's our long-term man, let's give it to him now. Keifer, I'll come to you first on this. Like, where do you stand? We were discussing this in the office earlier, and one of our colleagues made the point, and it's a good one, and I hadn't considered it. Do you give it to Van Dijk now, with the view that Trent will obviously get it further down the line, and it allows Trent to just adapt to life in midfield,
away
adapt
from the limelight, yeah.
Yeah, has he got enough on his plate now, or can he be Liverpool's leader straight away?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, funny enough, I've been listening to Henderson's book in over the last few weeks, and earlier this week he was talking about the 2018 World Cup and how that was a really pivotal moment for Trent. Obviously they've both gone away with England. I think they were the only two Liverpool lads on England duty, and he said that's when Trent really came out of his shell, and at that point was the first time he realised that Trent kind of had the credentials of a future Liverpool captain. So that's straight from the horse's mouth as someone who's done the job and inherited it probably at a similar age to Trent. If he's saying he's kind of got all the credentials, I think that bodes well. I think there's different types of captains. I think Henderson is probably someone who, you look at a Gerrard, who was obviously the best player in every Liverpool team he played in, and he would lead by example. And also Carragher would probably not good cop, bad cop like James Milner and Jordan Henderson were, but it was probably in the sense of, I think Carragher was more of a vocal one and Gerrard maybe led by example. Not that Gerrard wouldn't scream and shout, but I think Henderson is someone who would scream and shout, but obviously he wasn't always the best player, and probably maybe one season he's probably been the best player, but I think he probably elevates everyone else's game and makes them better players. You're looking long term. Alexander-Arnold is probably going to be Liverpool's best player. I mean, he's a Galactico, isn't he? In kind of his own right and what he can do. It's difficult because, as you say there, Van Dijk's kind of, if he's not already hit his peak, he's kind of in it at the minute, isn't he? And he maybe already had it. He's 32, is he? I think Van Dijk, 31, 32. He's got 2 years left on his deal. And if we do talk about a new centre half coming in, this summer or next summer, someone of a Levi Colwell's kind of stand-in of someone who can partner Ibrahima Konate long term, you do wonder what that kind of says for Van Dijk's place in the team long term. At the moment, I think he's the perfect captain for Liverpool. But I just wonder if, while you are rebuilding everything, you might as well. Do you just give it straight to Trent and say, right, you're going to be the captain? You've also got Andy Robertson here, who's Scotland captain. You've got Van Dijk, who's Dutch captain. You've got Cody Gakpo, who captain PSV. You've got all these captains, Mohamed Salah, these supreme athletes and brilliant footballers to learn off. They've all been there and won it alongside you. You can be the captain, but you can learn off these for the next 2 or 3 years and kind of hone your own skills and can really become your own captain. And I think during Henderson's early days, he spoke a lot about wanting to be Gerrard, but you kind of naturally find your own way to captain a team. And Trent will find that in due course. He probably hasn't found it at the minute. So that would kind of be my thing of like, well, if we're doing it, we might as well just do it now. What's the point in doing it again in 2 years? But I think the other shout is Alisson Becker. I think he's got a really good shout in this. He's along with Trent and I don't even know if you'd say Van Dijk anymore, but certainly long term, he's someone you can see being at Liverpool for the next 4 or 5 years. I mean, he's only 30. He's again one of the best players in his position in the world, if not the best. He's one of Liverpool's most important players. He's been introduced into this leadership group 2 years ago. So I don't think Liverpool are short of options, and I certainly don't think it's a case of when you looked at when Gerrard left, and I think kind of options were like Emre Can and maybe a Saka or Henderson. I think whoever the armband does end up on, Liverpool will be well placed. And I think we can all say now at this moment in time, it's only a matter of time before Trent gets it, whether it be now, in 2 years, 3 years, or whatnot.
Where do you see it, Theo? Because I suppose that, Alisson is an experienced head, and I think as a spokesperson, that last season, I was very impressed with how he came out when Liverpool were in their various dips that lasted a long time. He was questioning kind of mentality and really did step up as a leader, I thought, not just on the pitch with his obvious very good performances. Do you think he could be in with a shout, or does it have to be someone who plays that bit further forward on the pitch, who can, get to the ref a bit more easily, can corral the players and lead in a more active sense?
It's one where there's probably over-obsession on the captaincy in England, and I think that's something Klopp's really alluded to in the past as well. Most of European football don't get why the English are so obsessed by who's your captain, and it's because we've got all these bloodied images of like a Terry Butcher or Bobby Moore, all these players who brought up on like Captain Marvel, Brian Robson, and Liverpool it's the same. You think of so many great captains. It's your Phil Thompsons, your Graham Souness's, Tommy Smith, Emlyn Hughes, Ron Yeats, and this is going way back, and even then going into the 80s, Alan Hansen, Steve Nicol, Ronnie Whelan, Ian Rush, John Barnes. Like, there's so many big names in Liverpool history that have been the captaincy, that have the captaincy. There's that added importance on it. The same way as if you wear the number 7 shirt, you wear the number 8 shirt, you wear the number 9 or the number 10 shirt. There's that obsession there. Whereas it's not the case elsewhere. Like, Klopp said that himself. European managers, when they come over, they don't get it. And you only need to look at Man City. They've changed captain, I think, 4 or 5 times now in the past 4 or 5 years. For us, since Company left, you had Company, Fernandinho had it, David Silva had it, Gundogan had it. I'm assuming Kevin De Bruyne's going to be the next captain, but that could easily go to Ruben Dias or something. There isn't that importance there. You just want a group of leaders Like, they all come out and say, oh, we're all leaders anyway, we're all vocal in the dressing room. Like, Liverpool's current captaincy pecking order, with the two gone, Milner and Henderson, is Van Dijk is third, so first choice, and Robertson was next. Like, he captained the team a few times last year. He's very much that vocal leader. Those are the now two last standing experienced heads. I'm not really sure who's ahead in between Trent and Alisson, because Trent's only had it once, and that was when Kelleher was in goal. And whenever Alisson's had it, Trent wasn't playing. So there's no clear which one of them's ahead of each other in the pecking order. It's just Klopp's going to have a conversation here. And then we have the player vote as well, who gets added to the leadership group, because we know there's going to be a very miffed Mohamed Salah if he isn't in the conversation.
Don't knock his name out of the conversation. I'm sure it was the game that Trent captained Liverpool, the Michelin game.
That was when he was miffed because he didn't get it. Yeah. But that's because that was a mistake. Trent wasn't meant to captain.
Should have been Origi. Klopp said, didn't he?
He thought he'd just given it to the longest serving player. This is how much they don't really care about the captaincy overseas. It is just the most experienced player, and that's why Divock Origi got it for so long. That's why Christian Benteke was getting it in cup games and Jose Enrique, because they were the only players like over 25 or something ridiculous like this. But because Liverpool want that added importance of it, like, it does feel like you need these big leaders. It's who steps forward. Like, Alisson is the player you can say next season, if he's fit, he starts. He is that voice. And then maybe Andy Robertson is the one who's screaming all over the pitch. But if they sign a left-sided centre-back, is Andy Robertson even first choice anymore? Like, Virgil van Dijk, yes, he's in the conversation, but he's had all this criticism from back in his homeland, saying he's not a good Netherlands captain. And it seems like he glides through games. You've not really got him as that nasty captain who gets that added level from players. Yes, he shouts, but he's more who leads by example. It needs that combination there. Trent probably will be a Liverpool captain in the future, but it's whether he's ready for it. I lean towards the fact that I think long term, but that's because we've had Jordan Henderson captain for best part of a decade. We had Gerrard captain best part of a decade before that. Like, Liverpool seem to have that iconic captain who just glides through as a generation leads through. You don't want to be changing it every year, but as City show, it doesn't matter if it does. They could give it to Van Dijk. Van Dijk gets an offer from Saudi next year. Give it to Alisson. He gets an offer to go back to Brazil or something, and then you just keep changing. It doesn't matter because they've got a very strong group of players, but new leaders need to emerge in this group. It's all very well having Alisson, Van Dijk, Salah, Robertson, but you need the younger generation to step up here. Szoboszlai was Hungary captain, but he's still getting used to new surroundings. Curtis Jones, he's someone who had the armband in the youth levels. You think now is your time to
youngest
step
ever
up.
captain, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly. So you need these players to stand up. Elliott's also another player who, whenever he comes out and speaks, he speaks very well. Like, you're all going to have to take responsibility here because Liverpool have lost a hell of a lot of experience, but these are all still players that have won everything and can be that experience to the next generation.
I'm sure Trent would relish it as well, wouldn't he? I mean, he would have grown up on Steven Gerrard, and he obviously gets to City and gets the club and gets what it means. I think he would really embrace that challenge. I think whichever way you kind of cut it and slice it, I think he does need to be, vice captain at least, I would say, just surely for the long-term kind of project that Liverpool kind of embarking on. You don't want to, say Van Dijk and Klopp go in the same summer, 2-3 years' time, whenever it is, then it's like, someone's got to appoint a new captain. I think if you can do it more of a seamless transition of, like, this is the, Theo says, get some kind of ranking in system again. I know there's a leadership group, but as Theo says, is, if you try and decide for who sits where in that leadership group, it's quite difficult, but as I say, whoever ends up with the armband, I think Liverpool will be well set. Jordan Henderson has done a fantastic job and, captain Liverpool some really iconic moments, but, obviously it's time for someone else now to step up and take that mantle.
And take over shuffle duties.
Yes, very important.
Absolutely. That first shuffle for the new man is going to be some moment. Right, well, thank you, lads. Thanks to Theo and to Keifer. Plenty to discuss there. I think we boxed you off with a new captain and at least one more signing, as well as Romeo Lavia. So, yeah, that'll do us for today. We'll be back on Monday to reflect on Sunday's game against Leicester, which I think kicks off at 10 a.m. at our time. Ian Doyle over in Singapore for us. So, keep an eye on the Echo website. Plenty there, and we'll see you.
You've been listening to the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.